It has been a long night and an early morning inside the State House. Members of the South Carolina House started debating the budget Wednesday morning, yesterday at 9:30. They are still in chambers debating how to spend the state's money right now, taking a live look inside the State House where abortion spending, cigarette tax, and a host of other spending issues have all come up. What does Governor Mark Sanford have to say about the state budget? He joins News 10 Stuart Moore for an exclusive live interview this morning. Stuart?
Thanks a lot, Hannah. Governor Sanford, obviously we are looking at the 22nd hour of debate. When you see lawmakers staying over this long to talk about it, what is your first feelings from that?
Empathy. I've been there, I've done that, and it makes for an awfully long night. Tempers tend to flare a little bit as the hours go, and I guess it's one of those things that it's a sausage-making process. It exerts pressure to get the thing done, and I think it's going to be done here shortly, and then they'll come back this afternoon for a third reading, wrap it up, and send it over to the Senate side.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a lot of things that are going on, obviously, right now in the State House. Governor, one of the big issues that they passed earlier, Part 4 of the state budget, where they're going to allow stimulus funds to come in. There was a letter written by 42 governors and 5 leaders from Commonwealths that said that they wanted more stimulus money to come to states to help shore up budgets. Will you block those funds, and are you supporting those to come into the state budget to help out something that the lawmakers here have already approved?
Well, I was not one of those governors, as you might imagine, on that longer letter to the White House. I think that it's fraught with a couple of different perils. One is if the original stimulus money that we had a debate on last spring will come to an end come next year, we will end up about $1 billion. That's B with a billion, $1 billion in the hole. If you spend all this money, it's called FMAP money, going in this year's budget, what you do is you take $1 billion hole and you make it about a $1.2 billion hole. I think that's a real problem. And so we're going to look at it awfully close. What we've encouraged is say, look, FMAP money is a little bit different than the other money. Why don't you take it and spend it next year, not this year, but next year, so that you lighten the hole, which is exactly the logic that they use in passing cigarette tax, so that we don't have as big a hole come next year. I think that's probably a wiser thing to do, and we encourage folks on the Senate side to do just that, or to be done in conference, or 2 more bites at the apple.
Yeah, and they're talking about $173 million that could potentially come to the state. 96-6 was the vote on that one. Nikki Haley, one of those that did vote against it. She votes a lot of things that are in line with your opinion. What do you feel of her chances as being the next governor as far as being able to continue the conservatism that you've tried to put forth in the state?
I think that they're good. I mean, that's how ultimately the decision is going to be made by the voters, but I think that they're good.
All right. Now I want to take a couple of questions from viewers that the viewers wrote in. Todd Nelson writes this: why are we looking to cut education while we refuse to raise taxes on tobacco and we continue to allow tax breaks from everything from wedding dresses to handguns, talking about tax-free weekend? Does the state really care about education? And Governor, yesterday the state, the House representatives did approve a 30-cent raise on cigarette tax from the 7 cents. What are your opinions on that, because you vetoed these cigarette tax raise in the past?
We don't think that economic prosperity comes from raising the overall tax load on South Carolinians, period. What we have consistently said is we have no problem with raising the cigarette tax. But if you do that, you ought to concurrently lower some other tax so that you don't raise the overall tax burden on everybody's shoulders, if you will, across South Carolina. That's still our position. And so, again, have no problem with raising the cigarette tax, but our point is concurrent with that, cut something else. That's not done in the House budget. Again, it may be done in the Senate side or in conference.
Well, that happened before in Act 388. As you know, they lowered the state's property tax to a staple, and it raised the state sales tax by 1%. Obviously, the state's in a lot different shape than what it was when it passed, so state revenue has not come in because people aren't buying things. Do you think it would be wise to continue that process by lowering that state cigarette tax, even though the fact that what we've seen in the past with Act 388 and how it's kind of affected the school districts where they're stuck in Kershaw County with potentially charging students to go to school?
Well, then if you were to argue that, you'd say never increase the cigarette tax, because it's something that's proven to actually lower the amount of revenue that comes in over time based on the tax going up. So I think that logic would be difficult given, the fluctuation of a lot of these things. I think that, what happened with 388, which is a bit of a different question, was at that time people were really making a lot of noise about not owning their houses, about simply being indentured servants to government and paying, in essence, a mortgage that never ended with their house in the form of property tax. I think what it begs is that larger question of overall structural reform to the way that we gather taxes in South Carolina. There's a commission looking at that. It's not going to happen in my tenure, since my tenure wraps up in 9 months. But I think that that's ultimately the byproduct of what you're going to see with the larger debate on 388.
Now, all night long, they've been arguing on whether or not to fund abortions over at the State House and how to fund those. Do you think not enough focus is going on jobs right now? Obviously, our state's dealing with huge job losses, and some of jobs are coming back, but they're in the communities that aren't seeing that huge number, like Allendale County and Bamberg County, where you're over 20% unemployment. Do you think more focus needs to be done on jobs going on in the State House right now?
Yeah, I mean, everybody at a policy level has acknowledged the obvious, which is, one, it ought to be the primary focus if it's your primary problem. And therefore there was a bit of tension, if you will, on the House side tonight about why are we debating this, why are we spending so much time as we are. It's still an awfully important issue to many, many folks across South Carolina. So I think it was worthy of debate. It was a very substantive policy change that was being contemplated with regard to the way that we offer benefits within the health insurance plan. But I think that the bigger question on jobs is one of context. You know, there are about 65,000 more people working today than there were when this administration, for instance, started 8 years ago or 7 years ago now. And I think that one of our big problems is the distribution of those jobs. I mean, so you have traffic problems in some parts of South Carolina based on the number of people coming in, and yet, as you rightfully point out, we got, you know, problems in some of the rural parts of South Carolina based on jobs not being there. I think that that's in part tied to education, which is a longer-term process, but the importance of vitalizing, if you will, some of what comes out of our educational product.
We can't fund everything, obviously,
Correct.
Governor, in the state budget. What are your top 3 priorities that can't be cut and that should continue their funding?
I think that what we're doing, I mean, in this kind of budget year, I don't think that you can have any no-fly zones. It's just not realistic given the magnitude of what's coming at us. I would say that law enforcement continues to be a core function of government, and therefore, if you look at some of which it's done, whether on the juvenile justice side or others, we need to look very, very carefully at what's happening in that area. I think, as you correctly point out, this larger notion of jobs and the economic development needs to continue to be a priority, particularly small businesses, and to look at ways to fund there. And then lastly, I would say, larger question on the budget itself, which is, let's not make a big hole bigger, and to be very, very careful about using federal money to make us a little bit better off this year, but to create a much bigger hole next year.
All right, we'll continue to follow the budget issue. Governor, last thing, and we got to get out of here. You filled out a bracket as far as showing the big government versus local people. Did you fill out a bracket for the real tournament?
My boys are filling that one out for me.
All right, he's getting a little cheat sheet. Thanks a lot, Governor, for coming in.
Yes,
6:40 now is the time. We're going to come back here with weather and more.